Photosynthesis. So we already talked about cellular respiration, and now we're moving on to photosynthesis, which is talking about plants. So what about plants? How do they obtain the matter and energy they need? So we already went over how humans and living things, which plants are living things, but we went over how like humans and other living things get the matter and energy they need through the food that they consume. So do plants eat food? Do plants respire? What role does soil play? Why do they need water? We're going to take a look at all of that about plants. So we're going to unpack processes in plants. And first, let's take a look at what we are going to learn about through our goal box, or like the unit objectives. So we're going to be on page 78, and let's go through what we're going to learn. So our unit objectives, this is on page 78. So unit objectives. I can develop a model to explain how an acorn can turn into an oak tree. So that's going to be the first question we look at. I can explain the role of carbon dioxide in plants, both in the light and in the dark. I can analyze lab data to determine when plants use cellular respiration. I can apply the chemical reaction model to photosynthesis to determine the role of the sun's energy. I can explain the relationship between cellular respiration and photosynthesis. And I can apply the model of energy from food and matter from food to explain how an acorn turns into an oak tree. So take a moment right now and fill out your goal box right here on page 78. If we think about plants, they obviously don't eat food to get their matter. So how do they actually get their matter? Let's get into this conversation by looking at an example and a phenomenon that's pretty much the opposite of what we just figured out with The Biggest Loser, how the guy from The Biggest Loser lost his fat and his matter through breathing out carbon dioxide. How are plants going to do this? So if we take an oak tree, specifically the valley oak is one of the largest trees in California, besides coastal redwoods or giant sequoias. Let's take a look at them. Here are some of their leaves. They can be distinguished from other oaks by looking by their tree shape and by the lobate leaf shape. So how they have little lobes coming off the leaf instead of one big leaf. So our discussion question is, if we take an acorn, which is like the seed of an oak tree, acorns weigh only 1 or 2 ounces, and they can grow into oak trees, which weigh as much as 3 to 4 tons, which is 6,000 to 8,000 pounds. How does the tiny acorn grow into a gigantic tree, going from A to B to C? So if A is the acorn, B is the seed, and C is the tree. So where does all this matter come from? Because obviously the acorn doesn't start out with all the matter that becomes an oak tree. So I want you to take a minute and write this down in your discussion questions on Google Classroom. Before you do that, you can think about, what do we already know that might help us make sense of this, about where all the matter comes from. Remember from The Biggest Loser where all his matter went? So think about where the matter could come from, or where the seed could get the matter. So what are the key points from our models that we've already done that can help us explain where the matter comes from to create a tree or a plant? So take a minute to also write down some ideas you have in Doodle Box A. So that would be on page 79. So if we go to our, so right here, relevant points we already figured out. What are your ideas about how the seed goes from a seed to like a seedling to a tree, and then any questions you still have about plants. So then also with our what's going on with carbon dioxide in plants, we did a gizmo as an introduction. So this should address some of our questions about plants, but let's first write those down. So our question that we're looking at is, how do plants get matter and energy? This is on page 79. And some things that we've already figured out are things you should know from the gizmo, previous knowledge, anything like that, is plants give out oxygen. So then what do plants take in? What are some other things that plants maybe need? You should have the sun or sunlight. And they go through photosynthesis. And if you don't know what that means yet, that's okay. We're going to explore that in this unit. So then any questions that we still have about plants is maybe how do plants use oxygen? Because remember, they do cellular respiration or they respire still. So they do take in oxygen, but how do they use it? Why are plants green or other colors like the flowers? And do they only give off oxygen? Now, you might obviously have some other questions, but those are some main ones that I've had from years past. So if we address some of our questions about plants, which of our questions have to do with carbon dioxide? So far, we didn't write down any of them, but we do know that plants take in carbon dioxide, so we wrote that in our doodle box A. So what is going on with carbon dioxide in plants? So we did one lab in Gizmo, and we adjusted the light, and we figured out that plants give off oxygen, and they take in CO2, and we learned that light has something to do with it, so you could change the color of the light and the light intensity. And then we're going to do another lab. You do not need to make a poster. We're going to do another lab that takes light and the dark, and it works with snails. So snails are a living thing that breathe in oxygen and breathe out carbon dioxide, so they go through cellular respiration, and we're going to see how it relates to photosynthesis. So you'll be doing that gizmo today. So this is the gizmo plants and snails. Remember that BTB solution was the solution that we blew into, and when we blew carbon dioxide, it turned that green or yellow color. So if it's blue, that means there's no carbon dioxide present, and then if it's green, there is carbon dioxide present. So you will need to remember that for your gizmo.